Hello everyone, this is GrindCore with part 4 of the Thin Red Grind, and I'm gonna talk a bit about creative play. A lot of people play too many tables, and as a result they have to autopilot make the same play in the same spots over and over again. Even if these people would then lower the amount of tables that they're playing, their brain is still hardwired to make these automatic plays, and they will essentially still autopilot on 4 tables, and thus be bored because not enough is going on for them. So how do you make use of the extra time that you have when you're playing fewer tables? Well, a great way to do that is to force yourself to take 2 seconds before every decision, even if it seems a trivial decision, like you have 7-3 offsuit under the gun, you're gonna fold. Pause 2 seconds, consider if there's any other play possible, then fold it. And this might seem silly in a lot of spots, where there's only one clear correct play, but if you don't do it, then in all the spots where there is another viable play that you're not necessarily considering, you'll always miss on it if you're not doing this. But if you're doing this 2 seconds, then it will be silly a lot of the time. But once you get in one of the spots where several lines are possible that you would otherwise not have considered, there's now a pretty good chance that you'll spot it, and as a result, you'll develop faster as a player, improve more. So here's a hand posted in the small stakes forums at NL100, though apparently it was played on a French site late at night. Right, so the villain here, we only have 10 hands on him, but he hasn't folded to any c-bets so far. Over 10 hands, how many c-bets can he have faced? Probably only one, but let's assume that it was multiple, because otherwise, I think he would not say this. He probably faced 2 or 3 c-bets. Alright. For the sake of analyzing the hand, let's just assume that this is over a larger sample. Villain is 35-23 and has a very low fold to c-bet. Right, villain, hero opens, king queen suited in blind versus blind and gets called. Then he c-bets the flop. It's a dry flop, so it's a standard c-bet, and he gets called. And then he hits some card on the turn. Right, on the flop, against a guy who does not fold to c-bets, is it a smart idea to c-bet air? Depends on how he plays the turn, but you kind of gotta have a plan when you c-bet the flop. Check folding is very often very reasonable against guys that don't fold to c-bets. Because they're in position and they're likely not folding to your bluff often enough for it to be worthwhile. So you need to have some sort of plus EV line that you can take on the turn to justify the flop c-bet. Otherwise you should just be check folding the flop. Now in this case I do agree that the flop c-bet is good because you can bet any Broadway really, and probably also a 9, but an 8 and under, it is gonna be, if you barrel there you have no equity at all. If you had a backdoor flush draw, it would be a very clear c-bet. Like if the 4 was a spade, definitely c-bet. But here, I think it's closer than Hero assumed it was here, because he just auto c-bet and didn't even seem to consider anything like check folding, or maybe check raising, or check calling, or always consider every possible play. And I think this is pretty close between c-betting and check folding. If you do c-bet, you have to make some sort of move on the turn. Alright, so now we hit the king and Hero checks. I assume this is to let him bluff with his air, which would be the correct play in my opinion. Against a guy who doesn't fold to c-bets, he has a very weak range getting to the turn with all his floats, so double barreling here would be criminal. You just fold out all his air. So you should check to let him bluff with his air. And then Hero here is considering a pretty tricky line to check call the turn and then donk bet the river to extract max value from pocket pairs. Alright, ask yourself this. If we check call the turn here and if we check here and you're in this guy's shoes with a hand like pocket sevens, are you really betting at the king? Probably not, right? You just check it down. So sure, if you know that your opponent is betting his pocket pairs here, then check call and then donk river might be a viable line. But I think if this guy is betting the turn here with pocket sevens, there's a reasonable chance he'll bet it on the river too for the same flawed reasons that he bet it on the turn. And also I just don't think the guy is betting pocket pairs to begin with. So this range is, a floated king, a 10 or air. So I think donking the river is horrible, because if the guy has a lot of air in his range, you should be check calling again to allow him to bluff again. So yeah, I'd go for the double check call here. And if this was a brick, like a deuce or a 3, there is some merit in check raising, because you check and then you let your opponent bluff all his air, and then you can make a very small check raise. And what's he supposed to do about it? He probably just folds to it. And yeah, you should just pause in every spot, consider all the possible lines that you can take. And if you're not sure if a certain line is good, because it might seem weird, just do it, try it, and then analyze the hand after the session. I experimented a ton when I was playing these stakes, tried out so many different lines, and eventually you'll find lines that work great, even though they might be unorthodox. Alright, let's move on to the session.
Alright, I'm currently at 4 tables of NL 100. Just started the session. Don't really have reads on anyone. But this guy is a fish. The first hand of the table he limped. In blind versus blind. Called a raise and then donk bet on the paired board and folded to a small raise. So I'll take that note on him. Here I'm going to double barrel because he likely has a lot of ace highs in his flop calling range, and I'll get him off it now. Unless he has a heart with it, then he'll call twice. So there is actually merit in firing a third barrel. If I knew that he was a loser from the small blind, then he can have a ton of draws here, and then I would be re-raising him small, trying to induce the shove. But most people have a pretty tight calling range from the small blind, mostly pairs and suited broadways, and since I have the suited ace, the amount of not flush draws that he can be doing it with goes down. He can only have king queen of spades really, and other than that he can have pocket nines and pocket deuces, ace jack. So I only get it in as a flip or behind, and then I'd rather just take the play my position and take a card off. 10 is a bad card. It gives me a pair, but he doesn't have pocket 8 or something. In fact, king queen got there with the 10. Now if he had a set he wouldn't be shoving here, so this is really king queen or nothing now. I'll let him have it. He might be bluffing with ace jack maybe on this board or something. Playing a hand against the same player at this table actually. This bet size kinda looks like it wants a call. But last hand we saw him jam river when he likely had the nuts. So that's inconsistent with his sizing. But yeah, the 5 on the turn is not really a good barreling card, unless you pick up some equity, so I don't think he's bluffing, so I'm gonna let him have it. Right, he seems to be quite aggro. I'm not gonna, there's a good chance that my hand is good here, or that I can win the pot. There's a good chance that he'll continue to be aggro on the turn in the river. And I don't want to make a play for my entire stack yet based off the reads on 2 hands, so I'll just let him have it there. When he makes it that small, I'm just gonna call and hope to spike something. Here I'm making it 3 instead of 2.5 because of the fish. And here I'll squeeze. Hand's not quite strong enough for calling, and it's one of the best hands that I'm folding, suited king. And here I'll take a flop, hoping that the fish will come along. If this guy was a regular, I'd definitely be folding. Opening 100% of hands on the button here because both players seem to be regulars, so don't have a reason not to yet. Fish very often have weird raising ranges where they limp strong hands and the raises are very often really weak. So when you see a guy with high VPIP and very low preflop raise racing, it's not necessarily a bad idea to 3-bet bluff him. Or to 3-bet him with someone like King Queen or whatever. But pocket fours is a flatting hand, so kind of wanted to 3-bet him because he seems to be quite aggro and is likely opening with suited connectors and stuff under the gun that can't really do much against a 3-bet. But 10-9 is not the best hand for it. Try to do it with an ace blocker, or if you're gonna do it with speculative hands instead of big card hands, do it with small suited connectors or something. That's better than 10-9 off. I'm donking this board because it hits my perceived range really good. Even if he has an overpair, he's probably not going to raise me here. But just call. Lots of turn cards I can represent. Right, now that all the draws missed, I don't think he's folding an overpair, so I'm gonna give up. Also the 8 makes it less likely that I have a set or 2 pair. That's weird, why is he betting so big? Because if he had something like a set or something, I think he'd be raising at some point because of all the draws out there. And he's not value betting this large with an overpair, so I think he's actually bluffing with the busted draw. So I think I'm gonna check raise bluff him. Oh shit. Yeah, huge river bets are usually a tell for value. It just felt so weird on that board. No, I was assuming he wasn't a fish because of stack size and all that. He's typing chat, so maybe he's a fish. Let's see. No, he's mass tabling. If I had a hand that wasn't really strong enough for calling, I'd be 3-betting him now. I think he's either check folding with air or he has some sort of draw. Air will fold to any bet size, but the draw will also call any bet, so I'll bet on the larger side. If he folds, I'm gonna limp call with the queen 10 suited, because I don't really wanna get 3-bet by this guy and then have to call out of position. And I think he will, he seems pretty aggressive, so he'll probably auto raise my limp with a lot of hands that I'm in really good shape against. And then I get to play post flop in spot where he's gonna be putting in a lot of money with the weak range, so that's good for me. And here I'll fold just because the board is paired. We have seen him limp re-raise, so I think we can discount premiums a bit when he opens, and that makes the EV of a 3-bet bluff go up. The players behind me seem quite tight, so it's fine to open to isolate fish really wide. If the board was drier, I'd check back, but since there's so many draws you can call with, I'll just value bet. Now, if he has a draw, there's no point in value betting. And if he has an ace, I'm beat. So I'm actually gonna check this back. Or maybe I could bet really small to get value from a queen or so. But there's a chance that he has folded that already and he has more ace x than queen x in his preflop range. So yeah, I think I'll just check back. 10 jack got there as well. Yeah, he had to bust a draw. Taking note there that he likes chasing draws. This is gonna be good. I'm gonna c-bet for value because there are some draws out there and he might check call with random overs or ace high. Very limited stats on the guy, but over the small sample he hasn't been too aggressive. Right, when he checks back here, he probably has some sort of showdown value, because it's an excellent board to c-bet. So I think he's very often going to be calling. Here I'm gonna 4-bet because my image here is kind of weak, unless they recognize me, but I've been facing aggression and folding a lot to it. And this is the second or the third time that he 3-bets me, so no, it could just be a nit on the card rush, but there's also a reasonable chance that he's just looking at my hot stats and going for it. So with the king blocker there, I think that was worth it. No, I should have made it 3 because of the fish. And here I'm 3-betting him again because we've seen him limp raise with a premium. And here I'll just check back my bluff catcher. If he has an ace, I'm likely beat, so there's no value in the c-bet and nothing to protect against either. Now I only beat a pure bluff, but I took a bluff inducing line. I can't fold this without reads. Yep. Here I'm going to flat to let Momo squeeze. Definitely jamming over Momo here. Even though we're a little bit deeper. I've just been folding too much to... yeah. It's good in his spot to go for the bluff, I think. Unless he knows who I am. But if you see a guy playing like me, just being very aggressive but never having anything, then it's good to just jam a lot on him. I think he probably has air, but he'll call him in bet. Oh wow, he didn't. It's probably fine to check there for pot control. And it's good to know that he does that, because now we know that his bets will be weaker, they will be more polarized, and also his checks will be more face up. The speed at which he checked makes me believe that he had a pretty weak hand. Because he has been kinda aggro, so when he checks he probably has small cards, and then the queen jack flop very likely misses him, so I can bluff at it. This guy's screen name is from The Wire, awesome TV series, go watch it if you haven't already. This guy's really tight, so I'm not gonna 3-bet 9s there. Against Momo I probably would, with intention of shoving. Well, not with these stack sizes, but for 100 big blind I would. Kinda want to show this down now to see what he check called with on the flop. And when he checks back this flop, he probably has something. So, and something like king queen. I could try to double barrel there, but I have shown on value. I'd rather check it down. If I had pure air, I'd probably try the double barrel. That's strange. If he had a bluff catcher on the flop, then why is he betting now? But draws hit, and he doesn't check call air on the flop, so he probably has something weird that's now value betting. This is a great spot because he's likely going to play back because the board is so dry, and I think given the aggressiveness that we have been having, I think if he has ace queen or ace king, he definitely doesn't flat here. So the only hands, probably even 3-bets ace jack for value. So I only lose to ace 10, maybe ace jack. And also think if I 3-bet him here, he's gonna spaz and do something like call it with air or jam with a gut shot or something. Snap calling a jam, of course. Oh boy. I'm gonna check here in case he has the double float, he can now bluff with it. Yeah, I think he would probably have called if I jammed there. But if he has a busted draw, some sort of gut shot, a pure double float, whatever, then he folds if I jam, but he jams when I check. And I have no idea what happened in this hand or the previous hand. The doorbell just rang and now I'm getting a text message. Oh no, it's it's a random text message. It might be my roommate who forgot his keys or something. And he's now texting me to open the door. But it wasn't. Alright, so these two hands that we played here. So he c-bet and then gave up. Okay, so he seems to be c-betting with air and check calling when he has something. Giving him the orange label, that's for dishonest people, people that you have to be careful around. Essentially the kind of players like me. I'd probably give myself an orange label if I saw me sitting at the tables. I was actually saying that he would have called if I shoved with in the 9-3 hand, but he got counterfeited on the river, so he only had 9 high there. He has been really tight over a smallish sample, but a lot of tight players also have a too high fold to 3-bet percentage, so even though he's probably not stealing very often, it might still be plus if he to 3-bet bluff him with good 3-bet bluffing hands. So I'll just try it once, see how he responds. And he folded, so I'm gonna keep doing it until he shows resistance. No, you don't have to 3-bet bluff him to beat him, because let's say you're on 2 tables, one he is 2 seats to your right, and on the other one you are 2 seats to his right. Then on the table where your button is his big blind, you're stealing way more of him than he is stealing of you at the other table. So essentially every time that he folds pre-flop, you're making money. You don't have to also do something at the other table, but if it is profitable to do so, then you might as well. Did I raise? If he's the pre-flop raiser, I should be giving up. I'm not sure if I'm the pre-flop raiser or the pre-flop caller. I'm probably the pre-flop caller, so checking down is good. No, I was the raiser, so I should have c-bet. Sorry, my bad. Got a little distracted there. And because of that hand, the 9-8 suited hand in the 3-bet pot that we played against him, we know that he likes double barreling at checkback, so checking there with air is horrible, unless you're gonna do something like min raise his turn bet. That might be good. Especially if you have your read that he raises ace x pre-flop, but and limps smaller cards, and anytime the flop is big cards, he has missed the flop, and then you can kind of own him by checking the flop and min raising turn, or even checking flop, calling turn, and then min raising river. It's unlikely he has a 10 because that paired, and there are some busted draws, and he's betting pretty small. He might bet larger with an ace, so I'm gonna look him up once. Even if I'm wrong, I get info on this. Okay, so I'm actually gonna try that now. I'm gonna check back and min raise him on the turn. Calling here to keep the fish in. I'm deep with the fish. There are some draws that he can have now with the 7 there, like 9-10 he can call and then kinda owns me. But I think a lot of his air will fall to that. He's probably squeezing broadways like Queen Jack, King Jack, because of this guy being the pre-flop caller, and then he's c-betting those at this board, but I don't think he'll barrel me. He will give up with them on the turn. So I think floating there once is fine, and the fish can also come along and maybe I spike the nuts. That would be nice. And let's see his bet size there with the 10 into 20. If he has an ace, I'm stacking him anyway, so I might as well check back to induce bluffs. Oh well, that takes ace combos out of his range. But it doesn't reduce the amount of bluffs in his range, so still calling, of course. Quite a drawy board, so I should either double barrel for value or check back to induce bluffs. And checking back to induce bluffs is better if he's aggro, and he seems to be quite passive over the small sample, so I'm gonna value bet. That's a really small 3-bet, and we're kinda deepish, so I'll just take a flop. It's not ideal, but I'll probably have an edge on him post flop to justify for the poor equity. Right, he doesn't seem very very bluff happy. He probably has ace king or so, which will check call if I bet $4. Could be going for a check raise, but I think since the pot is kinda small and the stack sizes are deeper, people are less likely to go for the check raise there. That's more a 100 big blind in slightly larger 3-bet pot plays. Yellow is for weak tide. Weak tide and honest. Right, I'll go finish up the orbits. I can both flat and 3-bet because he's opening quite wide from under the gun. The problem with 3-betting is that he's probably not folding a hand like 8-9 suited, and he's gonna play back at me post flop. That might actually be a good thing, because if he check raises I can jam over it. Well, I'll just flat to get in a guaranteed spot. By 3-betting he might fold. I think after that ace-9 hand, raising here goes up in EV, because I think he'll be a little bit less, a little bit more scared to play back at my raises. So I'll do that, because I know he's going to be aggressive even with his bluffs, and if I call, he could, be value betting twice with 10 jack off or something, and then he rivers a 10, and then he'll check call because draws missed because he's paranoid. So I don't really want to take the calling line against him. Reasonable chance that he hit the ace, that he called with ace queen or something. I think if he has a bluff catcher and I bet here he's calling, so I'm just giving up. Yeah, and if I call flop, then he bets turn, and then I call turn, and then it was just as expensive. In fact, his turn bet might have been larger than my raise, because the pot would have been $18 and I only raised $10 more, and I think he probably barrels larger than 10 into 18. So even if he has a king, raising flop can be preferable, unless he 3-bets it on the flop, of course. But again, because of that ace-9 hand, I think he's a little bit scared to re-raise me on the flop. I'll get more calls than folds. If we hadn't, if we didn't play that ace-9 hand, I would just have called the flop there. Alright.
Alright, my Hollow Manager isn't working anymore, so I'll review the hand from the video. I want to talk about the King-Queen hand here on table 3, where I flat pre-flop and I decide to lead at this flop. Now I could talk about leading here, I stated brief reasons during the video, but actually have a DC short coming up where I'll talk about donk betting theory, and it's gonna blow your mind, so definitely watch that. And I won't really talk about it in here because it will be double information. He calls, I bet again on the turn, he calls again, and then on the river. My plan here was to check fold. I guess my plan was just to give up, but then he bet, and I started thinking about what he could be betting here, because when I bet so large on the flop and the turn, I'm wrapping a monster like a flop 2 pair, a set, a straight. So against, if my range is either a bluff like a busted draw or one of those monsters, then he would never be value betting with an overpair here, so we can take that out of his range. And if you can't have an overpair, then what value betting hands are remaining in his betting range here? Well, obviously if he has a set, he now has a boat and he's value betting that. But would he really on a board this wet? Would he slow play a set twice? I think with pocket tens, especially top set, he probably raises. Yeah, and even with pocket nines or pocket eights, he probably raises at some point. Same goes for top 2. It might be 9-8 maybe that he calls twice and now raises, but if he has 9-8, it's probably 9-8 suited since he raised from the cutoff, and the spade, the diamond and the club are already out, so there's only one combo of that 9-8 of hearts. And yeah, it just didn't feel like he could have a value betting range here, but he could, however, have busted draws. And a check raise all in here, there's already $104 in the pot. If I raise all in for 78 more, then the final pot is gonna be $182. So that check raise all in has to work 79 divided by 182. It has to work 43% of the time. There's a reasonable chance that a river bet here is always a bluff. The only problem with the check raise that I have here is his particular bet size. He bombs it. It's very close to full pot. And this is actually pretty similar to the pocket kings hand I had in the earlier video against the fish, where I got min raised on the turn. I think the board was 3, 4, 5 rainbow, and then a jack on the turn. I double barreled and I got min raised. That particular line of the call flop min raise turn from a fish simply always has top pair top kicker beat. So in that case, it also had pocket kings beat. And from the average regular, it's also true that any bet on the river this large is always with a monster for value. It's such a consistent tell. Very much like that min raise on the turn. So even though it makes no sense for him really to have a strong hand here, just because he bets that large, I should still let it go. And that was my mistake. I briefly considered his bet size, just like I did in the previous video with the kings against the min raise on the turn. And then decided to still go for the check raise because it only has to work 43% of the time. And he can have busted draws, but it's very hard for him to have a value hand. So normally this bet or this check raise will probably work way more than that. But against this particular size, it just has to be like the 9-8 of hearts or maybe a slow played set. And that's what happened here. I check raised all in and got called by quads. And even though the check raise all in is only for $28 more, if he has a busted draw, there's no way he's calling with ace high or something. When I check raise all in, my line is extremely consistent with me having a boat. And it doesn't really matter that I give him insane pot odds. He's polarized here. He either has a boat himself, or he has a total bluff, and he simply won't call, even though I give him really good pot odds to call. So the fact that I have very little money behind actually works in my favor here, because that makes the bluff cheaper without reducing the fold equity. Alright, let me know if you have any more questions about any hand in the video. I'll be happy to reply. And keep an eye out for the DC short on donk betting. This was GrindCore for Deuces Cracked.